I'm Mac McGregor, and this is our first Gender Sensei Podcast. And we are going to be talking and educating about all things gender once a month on our Gender Sensei Podcast. Everything in the world, from gender pay gap to binary gender system to transgender to the transgender umbrella to all kinds of things that have to do with gender. There's so much to talk about. It's such an interesting subject, and it's so complex. And I have a wonderful guest with me today who actually speaks with me. I met Jane speaking on panels together at the University of Washington.
800 kids at one time.
800 kids at one time asking us questions about gender.
Very impertinent question.
Yes. This is Jane Goto, and Jane is an intersex woman, and Jane also is a consultant for Children's Hospital. Tell us about that.
Several years ago, two of my gal friends who have the same intersex condition that I have, coincidentally, they live on the same lane in Sammamish, so that's a clue as to frequency. One is a nurse by profession, the other is a social worker by profession. There is a theme of overachievement here that we might want to talk about later on. I am a teacher by training, an adult educator, I should correct myself. We met a wonderful social worker in Toronto. Remember the SARS summer? And then there was that huge blackout on the East Coast? My plane was the last plane to land in Toronto.
You're lucky.
The only reason it was the last plane to land was somebody had flushed a paper cup down the toilet and we had to sit on the tarmac after receiving clearance. And so that delayed us, but once apparently the doors are closed, you are in the air even if you're on the ground, so we were the last plane to land. Exciting times. So that was a conference for people with intersex traits. And there was a social worker there by the name of Barbara Nielsen who works at Sick Kids in Toronto, which is Children's Hospital in Toronto, but they call it Sick Kids. And they had just created a team approach to handling newborn children and toddlers with intersex traits. Before that, it was usually you would meet a urologist and the urologist would guide your treatment or your child's treatment. And like other methods or areas of medicine, the thing to do about that time was to create a multidisciplinary team. The craniofacial folks had been the pioneers at that, and so rather than just having a facial surgeon run the treatment plan, they would have a social worker and all sorts of other people around the table, and they would all give input into what the best plan for this child was. What they also learned over time was patients that were 9, 10, 11, 15 years old told their stories to them, including, I wish they'd waited until I could express my own wants and desires, because the rush in medicine is to do the thing as early as you can do the thing.
Right.
Which is predicated on several strange beliefs. Do it when they're babies, they'll never remember.
Of course.
Babies heal so well.
Yes.
You'll never have to explain this. So those sound like great ideas until you really look at them straight in the face. So Barbara told us about this team, and it was revolutionary at the time. This is probably 10 years ago. So with her guidance and encouragement, my friends in Sammamish and I wrote a letter to the head of urology at Children's Hospital and asked him two things. Could we have you help us by providing a meeting room for an inaugural support group meeting, and could some of the members of your staff come and do a question and answer thing? Secondly, could we offer up our services? We're contributing members of society. We're not circus performers per se. Yeah. We're just regular, as it turned out, 3 heterosexual housewives from Sammamish and Ballard, non-threatening.
Right.
I had never heard the word heteronormative at that point, so excuse me as I talk about my life experience, because I have had these big jumps in my own personal evolution, the way I think about things.
Well, I mean, when we talk about language, I remind people of this all the time. Language is a living, breathing, ever-evolving, constantly changing being. And even those of us on the front lines of teaching about LGBTQ, sexuality, and gender, we have to keep up. It changes quickly.
Yes, and it's so frustrating because when you say sex, what does that mean? The sex act?
Right, it means
male or
something different
female?
to
Or
almost
what does
everyone
it
in the
mean?
room. Right.
So the language is really inadequate, isn't it?
Yes, it is. And so let's back up just a little bit, because we jumped into that without really, so the LGBTQIA, the alphabet soup of our community, I call it. What does the I mean? That's what we're talking about, intersex. What does it mean if you were to just explain it to someone that has no understanding of it?
Well, my definition of intersex has evolved over the last 12 years. When I first started working for what was called then the Intersex Society of North America, I had never said that word out loud. And if you want to talk about a mind-blowing experience, I went from not acknowledging it about myself, never saying the word out loud, to working in an office and answering the phone. Good morning, Intersex Society of North America.
Wow.
I thought I was gonna die.
That's a big jump.
But my modus operandi in work, I come from a systems IT background, was always to jump in the pool at the deep end, even if the pool was on fire. Like, sure, I'll teach that software in the morning, and I'd stay up all night long to learn it. So I applied that same, masochistic tendency to my personal life. And the first day I went to work, my mom was staying with me, and I hate to be crude, but I vomited violently as I was getting ready for work. Sometimes when there's something going on in your brain, it manifests itself physically, right? And she said in a typical mother way, "Oh, for God's sake, quit that job, it's gonna kill you." But I knew, like ripping a Band-Aid off a hairy leg, that it was what I really needed to do. It was hard. It was really, really hard. So what does intersex mean? Well, about 1 in 2,000 people, and that's just a number, have a body that's different, or a chromosomal makeup that's different, or something about their reproductive systems or their sexual anatomy or their genitals is incongruent, or it's not what was expected with normal boys and girls, not making sense as far as the typical definitions of male and female. And I think the reason you and I are placed on this planet at this time in history is to blow those definitions wide open, right?
I agree, we're on a mission. Yes. And so interesting that you mention the normal definitions of boy and girl, or biological sex, I like to call it, because I refer to this when I teach as the magic letter. It's the magic letter that someone looks at you in a hospital room usually, or when you're born. There's someone, a nurse, usually it's not even the doctor, it's a nurse or somebody that looks at you and then puts this magic letter on a piece of paper that follows you the rest of your life.
And imagine if, rather than putting a magic letter on a piece of paper, the nurse and the other persons in the delivery room don't express joy, but, oh my God, that's going to follow you around the rest of your life too.
Oh, of course.
Yeah.
And so sometimes with an intersex baby, they can see physically, they can see on the outside that there's some of each genitalia or something that's different about the baby. And then what do they do with that magic letter? Do they just put nothing?
I don't know if this is still the case, but I was told several years ago that in the computer system, and I'm all about databases and all that kind of stuff, at Children's Hospital, there's M and F, but there's no other or to be determined. There's only two. So I don't know whether that's been changed or not. So right from the get-go of data entry, there's this forcing into one of two pigeonholes.
Right.
It's kind of starts right at the very beginning, Matt.
It really starts before that. I mean, when a woman's pregnant, it's already started.
What's
because
this
what
new
is
obsession with gender reveal parties?
Oh my gosh.
I see
Are you
something.
on the pink team or the blue team?
Oh,
Yes.
And before the kid even has a chance out of the hopper, for goodness sake. There was an ad in a drugstore chain flyer that you could not only test whether you were pregnant or not with a stick, peeing on a stick, but it would also reveal the gender of your child.
I read about this new test that's supposed to tell you the gender.
And
I'm not sure how accurate that is.
You and I are living proof that is what we call in Canada horse hockey.
Yeah. I love, one of the things that I love talking to Jane, because I love her expressions, like she said, before the baby's even out of the hopper. I like that. Horse hockey. I haven't heard that since my grandfather. He used to say that kind of thing all the time. Yes. I love it. You have some great Canadian expressions. But sometimes it's more complicated than that, because we'll tell your own story. Your own story is really interesting.
When I was born in 1955 in North Vancouver, BC, I was born a healthy baby girl. There wasn't anything unusual or ambiguous about my genitalia. And so the assumption is that intersex equals hermaphroditism, which equals ambiguous genitalia. Many people with intersex traits, it doesn't come to light until maybe puberty doesn't happen when and how you might be expecting puberty to happen. So here I am, for all intents and purposes, a baby girl. There was nothing unusual about my genitals. I have to laugh when I say that, I'm sorry. I think that does protest too much.
We're what? So I have to say something funny. I often say when I teach and speak on gender panels that it's the T and the I people that we talk more about our own genitalia than anybody in the world ever talks about genitalia. Everybody wants to know about
after 10 years or 12 years in activism, I've often said to people, I just love to have a conversation that has nothing to do with genitals. But I want to quilt. Can I just quilt?
Yes.
So sometimes it doesn't come to light until much later. That's why that 1 in 2,000 statistic is really sketchy, but there's no statutory requirement to report these things. And if you say something more frequent than 1 in 2,000, then people start chipping away at your rationale, like prove that. So everybody agrees at least 1 in 2,000, but anyway. My particular condition is called complete androgen insensitivity syndrome. It used to be called, up till about 20 years ago, testicular feminization, because it turns out that even though I have a female body on the outside, I had undeveloped testes up in my abdomen instead of ovaries. I found that out when I was 24 years old.
Wow.
Talk about a mind-blowing experience that was. I knew something was different about my body because I hadn't menstruated.
Okay.
But I was, believe it or not, a very active athlete. And Nadia Comaneci, here's a word, didn't have a period because her body
was so
fat
amazing to
ratio.
watch. Yeah.
Anyway, so maybe it was the carrots. I simply wasn't eating enough carrots. I don't know. But
you're right, a lot of young female athletes,
Yeah.
I was an athlete, they either didn't have periods at all, menstruation, or it was so minimal that,
Yeah. I think it's the body's way of making sure that you can maintain a pregnancy because you've got enough body fat or something like that. I mean, there's lots of fail-safes in nature.
So other than that, though, was your puberty normal?
No, not really.
Okay.
I had breast development, and interestingly, I had no acne, but I had no underarm hair and no pubic hair, which caused me great embarrassment because there was a nude beach in Vancouver by the University of British Columbia. I don't know why, but for some reason I really wanted to go there, but that difference kept me away from that.
You were just before your time. Now they're all shaved on the beach. So don't worry.
As I tell my students at Seattle University when I talk there in nursing, I save $65 a month, thank you very much.
That's right.
And also there's worse things in the world than not having a period.
No kidding.
Let's savor that for a moment. I now, in retrospect, at 60, look upon a lot of this as gifts, bonuses, silver linings, but it took a lot of work to get to that point, right? You know what I'm talking about, don't
I totally get what you're talking about. I now look at it as a gift as well because the view I have of the world is so much bigger because I've lived it and walked it from both sides. I've experienced what women go through. I've experienced sexism from that side. I mean, and it's so interesting when you have a much broader view, right?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
Although amazingly, that doesn't change some people's perspective on the world whatsoever.
Well,
That's another podcast.
some need to be hit over the head with a hammer, a bigger hammer. Yes.
Anyway.
So you found out. How did you find out?
I hurt myself at work picking up a first generation laser printer, which kids was huge. And I did a lot of damage to my back, so the pain drove me to seek medical attention. A lot of intersex people avoid medical care at all costs for some obvious reasons we can talk about later on. And I luckily found a female physician, not that they're more empathetic, simpatico, or knowledgeable, but it was what I needed at the time. And she fixed my back problem to the best of her ability and asked me, do I really want to know why I've never had a period? And I trusted her, and so I said, sure. So this was 1978, 79, I mean, the dark ages. And the first test I had was a buccal smear, where the large, like on Maury Povich. Are you the baby daddy?
We're going back. Yeah. Wow.
So they print that out in the old-fashioned days, and they map out all the chromosomes, and you're not XX like we thought you would be, because you have a womanly body.
Right.
You're XY. Dun, dun, dun. So I get an appointment for a session with a genetic counselor who was charming, and she said, oh, you're lovely, you're so feminine, nobody would ever know there's anything different about you. The only thing you have to concern yourself with is your inability to have children. Go forth, have a wonderful day. And I'm going through all this like psychic angst.
And
There's
you're
a storm
24.
going. Oh my God.
Wow.
And how's my Japanese husband from